Let's bring in David DeRoche, professor at the National Defense University and a former Pentagon director of Arabian Peninsula Affairs. David, you're joining us now from Washington, D.C. What's your main takeaway from the last few hours and everything that we're seeing?
Well, it's the determination of Israel to destroy Hezbollah's ability to conduct fires into Israel. So when, we lose sight of this, but Netanyahu is responsible to his electorate. And, Hezbollah had basically said they were going to make northern Israel uninhabitable. I don't think any Israeli leader can do that. What's really profound about this is how compromised Hezbollah's internal security was. So you saw a number of attacks which were preceded by an amazing commando raid into Syria that destroyed the Iranian Hezbollah missile fabrication and storage facility, followed up by this blow after blow after blow. So it remains to be seen. Hezbollah has the ability to reconstitute itself if the Lebanese state, which, the Lebanese army is not involved in these factions here, if it does not choose to try to reestablish sovereignty over all of Lebanon. But at least in the short term, Hezbollah has been set back many, many years in its ability to project power outside of southern Lebanon in the Bekaa Valley.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, whether it is possible to assess at this very early stage still the damage that has been done to Hezbollah. There is no doubt that yes, of course, this is damaging to them, but at the same time, they've spent 2 decades, according to most analysts, and I think you won't disagree with me on this, they've spent the best part of 2 decades arming, preparing for a moment like this. So one assumes that Hezbollah, as one of the most powerful armed groups in the world, is ready and able to sustain something like this.
Well, yeah, but the level of the compromise really is breathtaking. I mean, almost all of the senior leadership has been killed. When I look at this, given Hezbollah's internal security practices, normally folks would interrogate each other, but clearly they were compromised at a level that was above interrogation by Hezbollah counterintelligence. That would lead me to conclude it would either be somebody at the top, and I think that's extremely unlikely, or what is more likely, that perhaps Iran's Revolutionary Guard interlocutors with Hezbollah, that there was a compromise there. That seems to be a little bit more likely, but even so, you've got a lot of problems here. First off, much of the missile inventory and the ability to produce it has been destroyed. And I disagree with one of the earlier reports saying that Hezbollah has shown restraint in the last few days. I think you could easily draw the opposite conclusion, which is that their ballistic missile capacity has been so degraded that they're unable to launch an effective strike with salvos of missiles against Tel Aviv or the interior of Israel. And then the other problem is when they recruit, they're going to see people who have a level of mistrust in their own organization, and that will have a profound morale effect upon recruits, potential recruits, and members of the organization. So even if it reconstitutes itself, it will be much more poorly armed, much less coordinated, and its morale and fighting spirit will be significantly degraded, probably for a generation.
So what you're telling us, you're right, by the way, that multiple guests have told me for the moment Hezbollah has not carried out the level of attacks on Israel that it could have done, right? It hasn't, except in one instance of one big missile that was aimed at Tel Aviv and that was safely destroyed by Israel. Except for that one instance a couple days ago, Hezbollah so far has not appeared to have aimed at massive Israeli population centers, namely Tel Aviv. And you're saying it's not because they don't want to, it's because they can't.
Well, it's an equally valid conclusion, and given the scale of destruction, and we forget this did not start with the pagers. It started with the destruction of the missile fabrication and storage facility in Syria. It's an equally valid conclusion that they no longer lack the ability to do this. If they had fired, say, 20 missiles at the same target, they probably would have overwhelmed any missile defense system. And I don't see the point when you're seeing the methodical elimination of the entire high command of Hezbollah. I don't see the point in just firing one missile, as a statement. it seems that the moment for that has passed. So we don't know, we won't know for some time, but both conclusions are equally valid. And given the circumstance, I think the lack of ability deserves a great degree of credit.
David, we're seeing the largest, at least from our vantage point. It's very impressive what we're seeing on our screen. It is remarkable, and to be completely honest, makes me somewhat uncomfortable to be watching this live. We are seeing fire raining down on parts of Tyre, the southern suburb of the Lebanese capital, Beirut. Again, we have said many times here, I beg your pardon, we have said many times since the beginning of this program that there are hundreds of thousands of people who live here. Yes, Israel says that it is aiming for missiles, it is aiming for, they said earlier, a command and control center. We don't know because we don't have the evidence. They don't tend to offer the evidence for, why they say they aim for a certain place. But the reality is that there are many people, many ordinary Lebanese people who live in the suburb of the capital. As I listen to you, you mentioned the provenance of Hezbollah's weapons, many of which come from Iran. On the flip side, many of Israel's weapons come from the U.S. So I'm wondering, as I see these hits on Beirut, the U.S. has come in for an enormous amount of criticism for continuing to supply Israel with weapons that have been used to kill Palestinians. As I watch these live pictures, I wonder, isn't the U.S. again going to come in for criticism if Lebanese people die under American-made bombs?
Yeah, and that's the burden of being a superpower. I mean, I've been honored to be on this network over a period of years, and over times I've had the same argument applied to weapons being used by the Arab states, the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia in Yemen. So this is a problem. And the other paradox here, and I haven't heard it on
David,
this program.
can I jump in because you said something that I'm not sure squares with the America's public statements. You said it's the burden of being a superpower. The superpower could act in a different way, right? Because the superpower is saying they want a ceasefire, is saying they don't want a military escalation, is saying they want a ceasefire. They have presented a plan which their ally Israel has completely snubbed, apparently hasn't even bothered to answer to. The U.S. could actually pull its weapons, but what it has done instead is in the last 24 hours commit itself to another package of military aid worth $8.5 billion to Israel.
Yeah, good question. So, and I'm glad you raised it. And again, I've been discussing this on this network over a period of years with regard to other countries, most notably the GCC states that were engaged in Yemen. So when a security partner goes against the current American policy, there is the possibility of doing that. But there seems to be a misconception. I don't think you share it, and I don't think your analysts do, but there's a popular misconception that somewhere in Washington there's a switch, and if that switch is flicked, the airplanes fall from the sky. The fact of the matter remains, Israel has a robust domestic arms industry, and there are stockpiles that have been built up over the years. So if the United States adopts the ultimate in coercion, just stops all things, it would take years to have an effect on Israeli operations. And what is
if the U.S. 6 months ago had said we're going to either stop delivering bombs, ammunition, or at least slow it down, don't you think by now we would have seen an effect? I understand what you're saying, that there's a latency between the moment the U.S. would decide in this hypothetical scenario to send fewer weapons, and the moment you actually see the impact on the battlefield. But that moment does exist.
Well, there is a moment, and we can argue over how long it would take. But there's one thing to bear in mind, which is Israel has a domestic arms industry, as do many countries that have been embargoed in the past. And the weapons that the United States provides generally are extremely accurate and extremely modern. So, for example, if Israel determines that it's a matter of their national survival to eliminate what they think, rightly or wrongly, is the Hezbollah command and control bunker in Tyre, and they're denied U.S. weapons to attack one block precisely, they will use domestically produced weapons and wind up getting the destruction of the entire city, as you saw in 2006. So there are some paradoxes here, but I think we are in agreement that the ability to affect something in the short order, and this campaign has lasted less than a week, is not quite, people have an exaggerated view of what the United States can do. And it's also important to note that, the United States is not or Israel rather, is not fighting the Lebanese army or the Lebanese forces. They at least claim to be, and their intent seems to be focused on Hezbollah, which the United States has no great love and affection for. So the argument seems to be over proportionality and the conduct of Israeli operations, not the rightness or wrongness of operations. So there are a couple of issues here that
the argument is about who winds up
situation.
dead. I think the argument is going to be going forward about who winds up dead. We were just saying before you came on about 700,000. Beg your pardon, 700 people have been killed in the last 6 days or so of Israeli strikes, and inevitably. Already 4 days ago, we were saying 50 children have been killed. So you understand where the argument goes.
No, I understand that, and there is an emotive appeal, and obviously around the world, particularly in the global South, Israel has become has suffered a great strategic defeat over the level of civilian casualties, but and the United States suffers as well. Israel's narrative, which has been
David,
constant throughout.
This is not against you, but
Please.
you know what so many of our viewers are going to be thinking when they hear you say something like that. They're going to be thinking, yeah, 41,000 people were killed in the Gaza Strip. And then Israel said, what we did in Gaza, we can do in Beirut. And now it looks like that is precisely what they're doing. And after 5 days, we see 700 people killed. So just the number of bodies piling up is completely out of this world and is completely, out of proportion with 21st century warfare, or at least what many in the international community feel that should look like. I sense you disagree with that.
Well, if you look at the casualty rates inflicted in large part by Lebanese Hezbollah in Syria, for example, you'll find very severe death rates. And if you look at the casualties inflicted by Daesh in operations in Iraq and Syria, again, you find casualties in the hundreds of thousands. But
but now you're comparing Israel to Daesh. You see the problem with that, and you see the moral questions that raises, right?
No. That's a false equivalency. You said that it was unprecedented modern warfare, so I gave you examples in 21st century warfare. I'm sorry to argue with you, but it's a very, very specific point that I'm making.
Understood.
I appreciate your courtesy on that point.
All right, David, thank you very much for your time. As we continue to watch events unfold in Beirut, and specifically the Israeli strikes that have been coming in with increasing frequency over Tyre. That was David Desroches, security analyst, joining us just now.